FSP54, Tembisile FSP5421. This is a summary of the President's talk in the World Economic Forum. It was very brief. It was a long one, but it was easy for us to pick up. The main thing that we saw the President talk about was the emphasis of the G20. And it being part of the whole in the world economies and the presidency. I remember when they called him on stage, they're saying that today we're going to be dealing with him in the capacity as the president of the Republic of South Africa, and also as the president of the G20. So it was very positively positioned, or well positioned speech that he took. His main emphasis was definitely on the capacity that which he was representing. Amongst others, the key identifier factors that which we saw there, it was him talking about the G20 first. I'm talking about the G20, was emphasizing the G20, the cooperation and collaboration being important for civilization. That was very important for us for me to hear about that, because he took it from a perspective of saying that the society, so from a developmental perspective, and him coming to name it in a form of civilization was very eye-opening and rather perspective changing. Because if you're saying cooperation and collaboration, you is saying its importance to civilization. You're basically saying that it is close to impossible for us to say that we are becoming a civilized society if we can't cooperate. He rather emphasized on cooperation alone and made a great emphasis on collaboration alone. So it was a very great side to hear from him, or rather emphasis to hear from him when he approached the matter and the G20, saying that the main important thing about the G20 is to emphasize cooperation and collaboration. So it was great to hear him. And then the second point he stood on was climate change. Climate change, I think it would be climate change risk. And then he went to risk mitigation. He went to mitigation, went to regulation. So that was the climate change. So it was in a perspective of climate change as a whole. He went to the risk that exists, the importance of having mitigations, or they would usually say mitigation strategies, and regulation that goes there. Also, and to the importance of artificial intelligence in the process, so the inclusion thereof. So it was very important to hear them talk about that, because once you talk artificial intelligence within climate change, it's a very important approach that we should be taking. That reminds me on when I started my career path, or started approaching or started learning about actuarial sciences. One of the things they said was, you find actuaries in climatology and climate related, you find them very strongly there. I was like, what is happening, man? Because of, you'd expect, when they saying finance, banks, and it was easy for me to get there. But then now when you start saying, now you talk about artificial intelligence and your climate change and climate financing, climate change solutions, it takes me to the function of actuarial sciences and such, and the going forward and the growth and the inclusion thereof, and the inclusion of those sophisticated models and those algorithms and approaches in making sure that our approach to climate change and everything, because if you're going to climate change, to be specifically, and it's one of those, making sure that estimations, predictions, obviously everything, it's one of those important ones. So it was very good to hear them talk about that. It was great. They also went to the agency to stop the destruction of the planet. They also emphasized that I think it was part of that the climate is slowly losing power in some of the things, and it is important for us to make sure that it is urgent, treat it as a matter of urgency. Make sure that we treat it as a form of urgency. It becomes number one. I remember a few years back when we were being told about CO emissions when we were in high school. We were told about that all of ozone layers and whatsoever. But today it's part of our reality. If you look at your budget, they talk about climate financing. It's rather a very important factor to consider. The next, so the urgency is very important that we consider. The next point at which they emphasized was the 33 years of Nelson Mandela. So basically, he was emphasizing the legacy and what he had learned and what he had represented, and saying that to combining the globe, there's a quote he specified there. They're saying that combining the globe, making sure that for human civilization, saying that when we combine the globe for prosperity, saying that if the globe is combined for prosperity, that being good for human civilization. He emphasized that and the importance thereof, and that being the approach at which it's very good for the approach of today's status quo of the economy and international balance of forces whatsoever. So it was very good to hear him talk about that. So yeah, it was. He also emphasized the importance, saying that in all this thing that's happening, unilateralism, nationalism, protectionism, and separationism and unitism, somewhere there. So there was a fourth one he mentioned. They're saying that it's very important that we familiarize ourselves, we get closer to unilateralism and all nationalism, protectionism, and this separations or whatsoever. The fourth one they emphasize there, saying that in all the efforts that we try, I always get excited when I hear him talk about protectionism, because I sometimes feel like in the plight of internationalization, to an extent, protectionism can become the opposite, can represent the opposite. So seeing him mention protectionism amongst us others, it rather made it rather gave confidence, and or rather gave sometimes it's a perspective change in saying that in the international perspective, or sometimes there is a domestic way of considering matters, and there would be maybe a more looking at it from a multilateral or a grouping of G20, or even from a greater international perspective than just of the G20. So the concept, the perception, and the limitation of protectionism, and the concept and limitations of internationalization. So it was very important hearing him talk about that, because it included unilateralism included nationalization, protectionism also. So it's very good to hear him talk about that as a way forward. He was very very descriptive and comprehensive in his way, and he was very confident with the approach of the G20 in all of these, and the future of the G20 being very good. There was a point where he emphasized the number of meetings there. I think it was 133. And where we are, that it would be a lead up or build up to the G20. We also emphasized South Africa's to the West, the formation of G20, that the West did it in months, and were able to do it in less than a month or so. They did it in months, and so he was very confident, saying that it's a form of a government that represented the people. So that also built confidence in his leadership, from the way he described it as not being a foreign thing from an international perspective, also showing it in the international balance of forces, it having a signifying or rather a stance that just speaks what South Africa is beyond everything else. So yeah, it was a very good one. It was great talking to them, and amongst others, it just made us see the stance of South Africa in the World Economic Forum. Tembi Sile, FSP 54211.